So, our guest today has earned a doctorate and a master's in mind body medicine and conducted original research on the process people go through when creating a lifestyle of wellness and well being. The research was honored with the Distinction Award for Rigor and Excellence in 2021, and the research was also published in an international peer reviewed journal. With over 20 years' experience in facilitating personal transformation and healing, our guest today helps people transform chaos, confusion, and suffering so that they can live peacefully and on purpose lives with love. Speaking of love, friends, would you share some love today in the house for our very special guest, Kari Allen-Hammer, Dr. Kari Allen-Hammer. Kari, it's good to have you in the house. Look at all that love going up for you, girl.
Oh, thank you. It's so great to see so many familiar faces in the room also.
I love it. I knew you were going to bring your own crowd. I'm glad that you are all here. So, Kari, I've been able to introduce you. You and I have had some time to chat a little prior to our event today, but I wondered if you could take us a little bit through your own personal story and journey. By the sounds of it that you and I've had a chance to talk, life has not always been easy for you, but yet here you are today. So do you mind opening up your story a little bit for us and letting us speak on the inside?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Thanks, Jeff.
yeah, sure.
Well, okay. Um, so this is a little bit, being on the other side and sharing a little bit of my personal story is a little unusual here in this environment. Some of you, I think, have probably heard some bits and pieces here and there. But I guess to start out at the very beginning, I was born to a young 16-year-old girl, and who had suffered a great deal of abuse. And so when I was born to her, I was born to a woman that had severe emotional, psychological abuse. Um, that meant that that meant that I grew up sort of underneath an umbrella of trauma. And unknowingly, I think my mom sort of recreated some of the same conditions or similar conditions that she went through. And so my early childhood was very violent. It was very lonely, and it was hard. And we also lived in pretty severe poverty. So in growing up, I sort of made my way by getting immersed into sports, trying to immerse myself in my academia, but I really wasn't so great at that. I had some head trauma, so I had a really hard time when it came to remembering things. Um, Gosh, I'm nervous talking about myself in this way. So
You're doing fine. Take your time. It's okay.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we all got you.
So I was fortunate in that I lived in a small town and I had a lot of support from some of my teachers and people like that. Fast forward, there were some experiences in my life coming up that really helped put me onto a strong path for myself. Um, Namely, that I was able to get completely immersed in physical labor, like stacking wood, chopping and stacking wood, hiking, dancing, and playing sports. I played volleyball and basketball as a kid. And in those things, I was able to completely leave my reality behind and get just completely absorbed in something else. And in those places, I would discover another part of myself. Um, Now I'm going to fast forward right after I left home early, still a kid, and I went into the military. I was in the service for 5 years. And during that time, it was good. I trained as a diesel mechanic. I worked, I did a lot of auxiliary maintenance. I worked on machines. And that helped me. It helped me to sort of develop systems sort of mindset. I started to look at problems from the perspective of a whole system. And that later became significant for me in my life. But something that happened when I was in the service was that I had to suppress. I mean, anybody that goes in the service probably has to do this. I had to suppress myself to survive in the environment. And particularly as a woman in the engineering field, I had to really suppress myself as a woman and become very masculine. And that was fine. It was fine for a time. And then I started to experience, towards the end of my career, I started to experience a bit of a crisis, I guess, a beginning of an identity crisis, where by day I felt very masculine, very much like a man in some regards. I dressed in coveralls, and I was greasy and dirty, and I had to be very tough and aggressive to sort of survive in that environment. And eventually I decided to get out. Part of it was because I was, after 5 years of service and experiencing quite a lot of discrimination and harassment, I decided, or actually I got transferred to a new boat, and I was the first enlisted woman assigned to this boat. And at that time I had been treated with absolute disdain, meaning people weren't saying bad things to me. Now they were just not saying anything to me at all. So it was like I didn't exist. And at that point, I was 5 years in. I had racked up a whole bunch of awards for the work I had done in the service. And I had moved up in rank as fast as you could. So I had really earned my, I had earned sort of a reputation as being somebody who deserved to be there. And yet at this new command, there was sort of a shunning of me because of my gender. And at that point, I just said, no, this isn't my fight. I'm not doing this. And so I got out. And after I got out, what I wasn't prepared for was that the service had given me a foundation. It had given me a structure. And being that I came from the background I came from, I didn't have anybody to go home to, really, when it was over. I didn't have a place to get started from. So fast forward, I was struggling pretty intensely for 2 years. Now I had 2 little baby boys, was in a pretty unstable relationship with their dad. And one day, out of desperation, I had been diagnosed with a major depressive disorder. And the only answer that was being given to me was medication. Now, I know I was on a call the other day, and people were talking about how important medication can be for people. And it can be. I agree with that. But I was one of those people who felt like it was being sort of forced on me, and I didn't want it. I felt like I needed some help with my emotional life and with my, just with my, my mental life. Like, I thought really badly about myself, and I felt really badly. And I just thought, if somebody can help me learn some new skills, I can find my way here. And but I couldn't find any help. I couldn't find anybody who was willing to work with me without taking the medication. And so that proved to be a pretty significant problem for a long time. Eventually, I stumbled into a place one day, and I got some information about a dance class, and like an ecstatic dance class. And I decided, I was pretty desperate. I was willing to do anything. So I went into this ecstatic dance class on New Year's Eve in I think it was 2000 actually, New Year's Eve. And I went into this dance class and started to dance. And initially, I was completely frozen. I couldn't move. I was so locked up and so frozen in my body and so afraid and so fearful that I could barely do anything. And over time, there's a thing in dance that I've since learned is that if you stay with it and you allow the music to move you, it'll help you. It'll help you begin to shift. And I did that. I stayed on the floor. I think it was a 2 or 3 or 4 hour. I don't know what it was. It was a really long time. And I stayed the dance. And pretty soon, even though I was still pretty tight and buckled up, I started to move energy through my body. And through that, it was like eventually it felt like this channel inside of me just completely busted open. And I felt completely changed after that. And it was like I'd gotten a taste of medicine. I'd gotten a taste of something. I didn't know it had happened, but I'd gotten a taste of something that I knew I needed more of. And so, through a series of fortunate events, I started coming regularly to this studio. I did not have the money to pay for it, but I just happened across the director of the program, who today is kind of a world-class dance teacher in the dance world. And he offered me a scholarship. And he said, use it. As long as you need it, come to as many classes as you want. And so I started coming. I accepted the scholarship and I started coming to every possible movement class I could get into. And this began sort of the thawing and the sort of awakening that started to happen inside of me. I started to connect with realizing the ways I had harmed myself, particularly self-harm. When I was young, I had done a lot of self-harm. Nobody knew about it because I was very secretive. I didn't let anybody know about some of the things I had been doing. But I had hurt myself quite a bit. And as a way to, in hopes that it was going to let my mom and people like that know that I needed help. But it didn't work. But in the dance, I started to see this part of myself. I started to come to understand. It was like I had come to sort of have this relationship with myself that was not attached to the pain, and I started to see myself as sort of as a child that had been looking for help. And anyway, so let's see. Eventually, I also had gotten connected with a New Thought spiritual community, and that sort of began to help shape the mind piece for me. So my body was in motion, and now I'm participating in all of these lectures and discussions, and people like Deepak Chopra and Marianne Williamson and Mary Manon Morrissey, and all of these people. They're big names now. They were big then, but I guess they weren't icons in the New Age world yet. And so I got to sort of sit directly at their feet and learn from them during this time when I was just really raw and open. And so I'm doing this, and I'm learning how to sort of do spiritual treatments, and I'm dancing and all of that stuff. And then, I had these two little boys, and I had this really bad relationship, and it wasn't that he was a bad person, it was that we were both kids, and we were both pretty ridiculous in some of our desperate behaviors that we did, and we weren't good together, and some pretty awful things happened between us. And eventually, through the experience of dance, I also started to have an awakening in my dreams, where my dreams became very vivid. And I felt like I was sort of meeting with, I guess, guides, or I was getting comfort and guidance through my dream state. And so all of these things were sort of coming together inside of me. And one day I sort of got this very, very clear image of living in an area where there were sort of these tall yellow grasses and oak trees and sort of in the valley. At that time, I lived in the Pacific Northwest, And my home area was down on the valley floor, not in my older childhood, but in my birthing years. And so I sort of essentially got a vision to return back to where I had initially been born. Now, um, I didn't have any resources, so I sold all of my belongings at a garage sale and got about $80, and that was enough gas money to get back down to California. And so, and that was it. I had a friend that said I could come and stay for 2 weeks, but she said that's it, only 2 weeks. And so I said, all right. So me and my boys and my music and some of our essentials, I packed them up in my truck, and we moved to California. And when we got down here, I was with my friend for a couple of weeks, and then, true to her promise, at 2 weeks, she said, you have to go. And we didn't have anywhere to go. So some other friends bought us a tent, and I was able to get some welfare assistance to kind of hold us over for a month. Now, some of you might be wondering, why in the world didn't I was a veteran, why didn't I get veteran services? I did try, but for women at that particular time, there was nothing available. I could not get anything. And I didn't have a drug addiction, and I wasn't fleeing a domestic violence situation. I had left before we'd gotten to that point. So I didn't qualify. I had fallen through all of the cracks that there were. So my boys and I lived for about 3 months, 2 or 3 months, in my car, in a tent. We got our food from the food banks, and eventually we ended up moving up into the mountains because I felt like I needed a place to settle down because my nervous system was really jacked up. And so we went to the mountains for a while. And through that whole journey, um, I was doing things like yoga and praying and doing movement through all of that. And, sometimes there was one time I got a flat tire, and the first thing I did was get out and do some yoga and do some prayer on a stump on the side of the road before trying to change the tire. And that was because at that point I was so deeply immersed in understanding that this was less about the material world and more about something else, more about an energy or a presence. And I had started to sort of cultivate this sense, this understanding, I guess, that I had to first take care of myself before I took care of the material world. And one day, while the boys and I were coming down out of the mountain, at this point, I was feeling pretty damn tired. I was feeling exhausted. I was feeling scared. I needed something. I needed direction. And so I prayed. I just said, I've followed. I said this to Jeff earlier. I've followed the glimmers this far. I've done everything you've told me to. Show me what next. And right after that, I had come across a road sign that said Coyote Moon Trail. And that was significant to me because in a homeless women's program, like an art program, about 2 months prior, I had made a painting and I ended up naming it Coyote Moon Trail. And when I came across that road sign, I pulled over immediately and I was like, this is it. And this is the sign. This is telling me right here, this area where I'm at, I need to settle down and set down anchor. So, I got into my little file box that I had in the back of my truck and verified that the picture was actually named Coyote Moon, and just kind of double checked this, confirmed that I wasn't losing my mind. And for reference, about probably 2 or 3 years later, I had thought maybe I just made all that up. And I retraced my steps and went back and found that that same place again. So it sort of confirmed to me that this had happened, that I wasn't losing my mind. Because during that journey, I really did think I was losing my mind, and people in my life thought I was too. Um, I was following something very definite in my heart. I felt like I was following a vision, but I couldn't really articulate it. And when I tried to talk about it to anybody, almost everybody I talked to thought I was in that job. and including my mom. My mom thought I had lost my mind, and she was genuinely deeply worried about me. And I didn't know what was happening. I was I was trusting the way that was revealing itself, and that was it. I mean, and I guess in some way, I in some way, I knew that this was bigger than this life. I felt like I was actually like that I was fighting for my soul, and that might sound a little strange, but I was in such a desperate place to connect with something very real inside of myself. Up to that point, I had felt like I'd created my life by default. And now I was in this journey of creating my life on purpose. And it was, it was worth fighting for. And because the energy, and even though the materially I was struggling, the power and the energy and the certainty that I started to feel was incredible. So eventually, through a welfare to work program, being that I had just come out of the service not too long ago, I was a trained firefighter, I was a diesel mechanic, I knew how to operate systems. I had a lot of professional skills under my belt, and I was very arrogant about, I said, no, I'm not, and the welfare worker would tell me I had to accept any job that came my way. And of course, there was Jack in the Box and Taco Bell and all those kinds of places were available. And I thought to myself, if I take one of those jobs that are paying $5.25 an hour, this is what minimum wage was back then, I am never ever going to get out of the hole. So I can't accept this. I can't do this. And so they threatened me. They let me know I was going to lose my benefits if I didn't take any job that I was eligible for. But I have this very defiant part of me, very, very subversive and defiant, where if it means that I'm going to undermine my own self, I won't. I'm not going to do it. And so I had told the worker, I said, and I forgot to tell you all this earlier, but I told the worker, I am meant to work with circles of people. I'm meant to help people heal their lives. And she looked at me like I was crazy and smirked at me and was just like, you are so far away from that. And she was right. She absolutely was right. She was right on. But this compulsion that I had was, I knew I just had this calling that was pulling me forth. And so I kept looking for jobs. I had a little job where I did some teaching when I was in the Pacific Northwest before I had left up there. And that was enough to get my foot in the door for this interview at a women's prison. Just initially, just as a recreation coordinator. Now, I didn't have any clothes. In fact, when I was going through that welfare to work program, I came in the same clothes every single day. And on Friday, the fifth day of that program, my facilitator said, Kari, you are in a career training program. You need to change your clothes. And this at the time is when I was still homeless, and I said, I don't have any clothes. I'm sleeping in my car with my kids, so this is the best you're gonna get. And she ended up helping me get into a hotel for the weekend. She got me a voucher, and eventually got another voucher to get into a studio apartment. And got into this studio apartment, pretty bad place. Nobody wanted to live there. Nobody lived there except for the people that couldn't get a place anywhere else. And they had single moms like me, A couple of us in the property. Most of the other people that were there were people that were just barely getting by. And the top floor of the apartment building was reserved for anybody that had been convicted of sexual assault crimes. So this is where we were for that first 6 months after being homeless. And I did get, when I went to that interview, I got a voucher to go get some clothes from a thrift store. My voucher was for $2. And I got a belt and a pair of pants. And my teacher gave me a shirt. And so I put that little ensemble together and went in for my interview and got the job. And that was the very beginning of me starting to really, really work with people, women in particular. And as I looked out at the women I was working with, they were very, very similar to me. Many of them were women who they had children at home. Most of them were there for either drugs or income generating crimes. And but they were broken. And so at that time, that's where it all kind of started for me. Now, I'm going to move this along pretty quickly. I know I've been talking for quite a bit. But from there, I put together a pretty phenomenal program that started to, where the women really felt like they could start to relax. And that's not common in a prison environment. And they started to experience some levels of healing. We had art. We did, secretly, we did dance. Dancing was not allowed in the prison. So I broke the rules. We did some dancing. We did a lot of artwork, and I also did some particular trauma recovery programs with them that I had been trained for. We had, and this begins to turn towards why at this time I didn't have any education other than the self-education from the spiritual study. And I can hear somebody's mic. Can you all make sure you're muted?
Yeah.
So I had this phenomenal program that was really built from the ground up. The women really, really loved it. And I had the little Hoover Commission come. And that's the California Governor's Watchdog Committee. They go.
I'm sorry, Kari. Friends, whoever's got their mic on, can you please mute yourself? I'm sorry, friends. I don't know who this is.
She apparently is trying to reshape her public.
Okay. Hang on for just a second, folks. I apologize. Okay. I found it. Kari, I apologize.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
All
Can
right,
I just, hang on just a second. Can I just stop and breathe, Kari, for half a second?
Yeah.
Yeah, just take a pause. Anybody else in the house ever experienced moments like this? There's intense moments, the courage and vulnerability that it has taken to share. Have you ever experienced it just almost like it frustrates the other side? And all of a sudden you hear these noises, you have these unplanned interruptions. It just seems like there's something that is trying to not let this conversation happen. I'm going to jump right on your bandwagon here for a second, Kari. And so what we do is we take authority over that, right? We take control over that. And we just did that by stopping. And now we send it. It's not a person, friend. Please don't misunderstand me. I believe with Kari, it's more of a spiritual thing. It's more of a universal principle thing. And so we kind of send a message, thank you, but no thank you. We're not going to be intruded. And you're not going to steal the joy that has already been prepared for the final conclusion of Kari's story. Yeah, look at the love coming your way, my friend. So with that said, Kari, please continue.
Thank you. So essentially the commission came in and checked out our program that we had and loved it, thought it was phenomenal. And then they found out that I didn't have any credentials and lost their minds and went to the warden of the prison and sort of tore into her, essentially. She called me in to her office that afternoon and told me I would never, ever be allowed to share again with any committee that came to the prison, and that from this point forward, I would only be allowed to share from a scripted narrative. And at that point, I sat there in her chair and I just thought, okay, it's time for me to pivot because this isn't, I'm not going to be muted in this way. And so a job opened and I moved into a recovery program and I started working in drug recovery. And anyway, now as all of this was happening, I had found my way into another dance community in the area where I was living. Now I was pretty shooken. Although I was working with people by day and helping women recover their lives, by night I was a single mom scrambling to get by, dealing with running out of gas in the middle, at night when I was coming home from work with my kids on an abandoned highway, scraping together my money to figure out how to pay my PG&E bill or my rent, fending off men who were trying to come into my house at night. One guy tried to tell me he was Jesus, and by rejecting him, I was rejecting Jesus. There was a lot of stuff that was happening, so I was dealing with a lot in my personal life while I was trying to move forward, and while I was trying to also be of service to particularly other women. And then my dance. So I had found my way into another dance community and had been searching for a therapist for a long time to work with. And again, I hadn't been able to find anybody willing to work with me because they weren't willing to work with me unless I medicated, unless I took the medication, because they said that my mental health was so severe that I was never going to get better, and that I would have to commit to a lifetime of medication in order just to be like normal people. And but I thought, no, that's not my path. So I danced, and I got involved in these committed weekly series for 3 years, and I began to find immense healing and integration through the dance work, and then came breath work, and then yoga, and through the whole. I started to sort of.
I'm so sorry, friend. Whoever is talking, could you please mute your mic? Please, whoever is on the app, double check. Let's all take a second. Double check that our mic is on mute, please. Thank you. Go ahead, Kari.
All right, thank you. So I continued to delve into these practices, and with the dance and the breath work and the yoga, and then I included. I also had counseling in there. A lot of that was with the same person, so she was working with me both on the dance floor and then also one-to-one. And I just, I started to find myself, essentially. I started to feel more solid and integrated. I got stronger. And now I'm working at the recovery program. I'm teaching classes. I'm teaching about relationships and parenting. I'm helping a lot of mothers who had lost their children to the system. I'm helping them repair their relationships with their children and bring their kids home. And then I started bringing dance into that community, and again, it was quite profound. Dance is like a truth serum, ecstatic dance, and a truth serum not so much for us, for the counselors, but for the people. We can't. One of the things that I learned for myself, and that I also experienced as a practitioner, is that when we get the body in motion, we can't lie to ourselves. There is sort of a revelation that begins to happen through the movement. And we become aware of things we need to know within ourselves, about ourselves, or about our lives, that um, that maybe we're able to deny when we just sort of are in regular movement in our lives. And this started to happen. This was happening for me. It was happening for the people I was facilitating classes with. And then I got a new boss who came in and took my program away and said, no, there's no evidence for that. I did get the program back a few years later, but it was through that experience. At this point, I was now in school for my BA because I had been told over and over, you have no credentials, you can't do this. And then I got told there was no research for this. And so essentially, a little bit at a time, I just kind of followed. Every time there was a barrier, every time there was a block where someone said, no, you can't do this, I found my way around it. And that's how I got a master's and then a PhD, was because people said no. And I was like, well, I have to do this. So I'm just going to go around you. And then when I was in my doctorate program, I essentially studied how people created lives of wellness and lives of well-being. And what I didn't know is that as I was interviewing people, my study became about, it was a grounded theory, which means you study from the ground of what people are actually doing. You gather the data, analyze the data, and then you explain a theory based on what people are actually doing. And so I had sort of studied what people were doing to create lives of well-being, and I realized that what I was seeing in other people's lives my own life had paralleled that. And then through that, I sort of discovered this three-stage journey of well-being, and that has kind of become the bedrock of the work I do now with people, is trying to guide them through these stages. But I guess, yeah. So, I mean, it's a big journey. There was so much that had happened. I guess the most powerful parts of that were again when I was told no, and I had to sort of wrestle with that question of, am I going to let them tell me no, or am I going to continue to follow that which is pulling me? And of course, that part won, and the journey is still unfolding. And that is where I am today. I dance every day. I do my prayer work every day. I write and journal. I do the work myself, and that informs the work that I do with my clients that I work with.
Yeah. How beautiful. I want us to just pause. There's an ancient spiritual word. It's called Selah. Pause and reflect on this. So just take that in for a second, friends. I love the conversation. I have to say, Kari, that there's just a different essence. There's a different flow and a spirit in this room than what I've ever experienced in any masterclass that I've led on circles. And I believe that you brought that to the space. So thank you for that. And usually the dialogue is a little back and forth, but your story, friends, did you catch the presence and the essence of the spirit when she was sharing her story? I felt like if I had interrupted you, it would be a dishonor to the story. So for that, thank you for sharing it with us. It takes a lot of courage. Thank you. I would ask, because we're going to have a few minutes to open up. I believe there are some people in the room. And friends, just as I had said, honoring Kari's story by not interrupting, if you have a question, just really think it through. If you have a statement or a comment, please really think it through and make sure it honors the space for me. Would you do that? Honors Kari and honors everyone else that's listening. That's not that we don't want you to talk. I do, but I want you to just think it through and make sure that it honors the space. Kari, I want to point out just a couple of things in your story that I drew notes of. is as you were struggling in the first part of your story and where you came from and your fight through the military, you had said life gave you a break. And that's when you got into the studio and the director gave you that break. I have like 3 or 4 highlighted bullets on my paper where you made the statement, I got a break. Do you believe that life gives us a break?
Um, Gosh, I don't even remember saying those words. Um, I, the way that I oriented was that there was, as I leaned in, there was, there would be the door opening, and
Yes.
that has happened. That has happened consistently over the last probably 20 or 25 years of my life in so many unexpected ways, where the door has been solidly shut, and it didn't always mean forcing it. It just meant staying committed. It just meant keeping my foot on the pedal and leaning in and trusting and knowing without I don't even know that it's something I created. It was more of a feeling that was coming from me, and I was just following it.
Yeah.
I was following that with commitment.
Yeah. Friends, in the chat, if you resonate with what Kari is talking about, leaning into that moment, just drop a 1 in the chat for me, just to identify. Yeah, that's me. I understand what it means to lean into that energy. The chat is lighting up, Kari. Yeah, by no means am I saying, I think some people have a misnomer when we talk about life giving us a break. It's not like life gives us a freebie. It's like life has observed our dedication and our commitment, our allegiance to this better us that we are determined to give life to. And when it sees it, universe sees and recognizes and honors, that's where I'm going to align Kari today with the director of the dance studio because she's ready. My mentor, Jim Rohn, always used to say, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Yeah. So I hear that in your story. Your perseverance is met with opportunity, not a handout by any means, but opportunity. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So beautiful. Now, friends, what I really want you to get excited about is that starting today, this session is the premiere, the debut, the launch of Dr. Kari's sessions here on the Circles app every Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific or Eastern Standard Time. So she started to talk about this groundbreaking work that she's created and has gone through, and now she helps other people with. And guess what? She's going to be bringing some of that content right here on Mondays at, again, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard. So you're going to want to make sure you follow her so you can get that. I wondered, Kari, if you could do us a favor and just give us a snippet of what is the work? Where do you start this work that is so transformational in the lives of people that you help? Where is that beginning point? Do you mind sharing a little bit?
Yeah. So we have to start where we are, and usually that is in the ground of our own suffering. We usually, and that's one of the reasons I have really appreciated the Circles community for this past year and a half that I've been here. Is that's often where we are when people where people are when they come into this community are in this place of suffering, and so we begin there. We begin at where the pain is, um, and and then we begin to lean into it because there is, I believe that there is a message. Um, there is a signal that our pain might begin. That pain can be emotional. It can be physical too. It does, our emotional pain does manifest into physical pain. Um, but we lean into that and we listen for what does that pain want us to know? What is it trying to say? What is it trying to communicate? Now, I don't know if Denard's class speak on this. I know he talks about from pain to purpose. I'm actually really curious. But in this way, we're going to lean in. We're going to ask, what is it asking of us? What does it want us to know? And from that point, we begin. So there's kind of a little bit of a the magic sauce when it comes to mind-body medicine is the flow state that gets activated through engagement in the practices. Now we get into flow state like you, Jeff. I also am a mountain bike rider, and through and I love it. But through physical exercise and through mountain bike riding and through dance and all these things, we can alter our brain chemistry, and we want to really capitalize on that while we have those good neurotransmitters and hormones flowing through our bloodstream. So with mind body medicine, we are intentionally activating that system, and some we're also leaning into and learning about how to flow science is a pretty meticulous science these days, where we can actually learn how to create the conditions to be able to enter into a flow state regularly and with consistency. Flow is so important to our healing and our recovery because it actually takes a disordered, disorganized consciousness and it helps us organize. And that organization and that integration, that's healing. And that's where this piece with the mind body medicine is that we bring in the element of self-awareness and presence. Presence is kind of one of the key pieces of I guess of transformation that begins to happen with sort of the mind body piece. So when we enter into this place of suffering, we're going to go there, and we may have to go there often, but we don't stay there. Next, we're going to pull out and we begin to explore, well, what are some pathways that I might be able to move into, that you might be able to move into in your lives, so that you can begin to activate this brain state change in you. You want to get that change because you're going to get a flood of neurochemicals and hormones that are going to move through your system and literally change your emotions, change the way you're feeling. We want you to have more endorphins. We want you to have more anandamide, which is a bliss chemical. Endorphins are good for your immune system and for feeling happy and content. There actually is a system, a science for how to be able to do this. And then there's also a cycle. A cycle of, we're not going to just like constantly be on go. We also have to do include the other piece, which is recovery. And sort of, so we have maybe like the more masculine aspect of it, and then we move into more feminine, and it's the feminine quality where we really, we can receive a lot of that life force energy that sort of helps fill us up. And that happens through mind-body medicine. And so we'll just kind of, and then after exploration, then we're going to move into experimenting. Some of it, my plan is to bring some practices to the session, just to kind of give you a taste of some of them. And then hopefully, if you're not already doing this, you're beginning to explore, experiment out in your community by maybe trying out some classes. I have a Friday morning dance class that's 15 minutes. It's just to get people to move and to have the experience of this dance. It's really about the endorphins and the chemicals so they can release into our bloodstream. I provide some guidance in terms of journaling. And it's all cameras off, except for me. I have my camera on. And we just dance. It's like, it's very informal. And if you want to participate in that, that's more, sign up for my email list, and then I can send you an invite. Because that has to happen through Zoom. We don't have that ability here.
Yeah.
So I think that's about it for now.
Yeah. We don't want to give the whole store away. We for sure. I put some information in the chat, friends, where you can sign up for Dr. Kari's newsletter. That will get you into the community and start receiving information. And then you can also get on the list to learn when these mind body movement sessions that she has outside of circles is going on. So I encourage you to do that. I do want to open up. We've only got a few minutes. It's been such an honor to hold the space for you, Kari, but I see a hand. Rachel had a question. I'm wondering if, are you okay if we take a couple of questions here before
Yeah.
we close our session?
Yeah,
Perfect.
absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Rachel, thank you so much for your patience. Can you go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sure. So it's actually not a question, but I wanted to, Kari, reflect my gratitude for your share back to you. And in these quotes, it felt like the takeaway for me, and sometimes others can articulate better what I am feeling than I can myself. So this is just sort of, again, reflecting my gratitude back to you. And the first quote says, "The thing about empathy is that you join a person in that vibration. So you can't give them a leg up because you are where they are. Compassion is remaining in alignment with who you really are while you are looking at a person wherever they are." And then the other quote that reminded me of your share, it says, "First, there is the thought, and then there is the feeling response. So I think and feel and think and feel and think and feel. But after a while, you are feeling and thinking and feeling and thinking and feeling and thinking. And when you get to the place where nothing is more important than that you feel good, now you are deliberately reaching for a feeling. And because you remember feeling that way, you activate a thought that feels like that. And when you activate a thought that feels like something that feels good, now law of attraction will bring you another and another and another." So namaste to you, and thank you for your share.
Thank you, Rachel. I love all of those quotes.
Wow. Gosh, friends, is anybody else's hair on your arms, the back of neck, wherever you have hair standing up right now? This is so beautiful. Rachel, thank you for your honor of the space and the spirit which you brought. Your comments was absolutely of a different dimension. Thank you. Thank you. To be so self-aware and aware of the space is an amazing ability from a human being in these days because we are so preoccupied with everything. Thank you, friend, for sharing. So beautiful. Wow. Wow. Kari, it has been a delight and an honor to have you here on Circles Masterclass with me and our friends. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jeff.
You're very welcome. Would you have 30 seconds of share, just something that's on your heart? Leave us with something else. And while Dr. Kari is doing that, friends, could you do me a favor? Put a takeaway in the chat for me. What are you going to take away from today? Maybe it's a word or a thought or a feeling like our other friend was sharing. But would you do that? And Kari, would you just flow with us a little bit and share, and then we'll close our meeting?
Yeah, I think what comes to me right now is just this remembrance that we each have the light within us, and to allow that to lead us by our hearts as we find our way to live and create a life that is authentically ours. You have a life that is exactly meant for you, and I hope that you have the courage to live it.
Yeah. Have the courage to live the light that is in you. And I so thank you, friends, for the chat. There is hope, potential. Make time for movement, creativity. Always lean in. Be yourself and stay strong. They just keep coming. Keep following your own path. So well said. Where I'm at right now in my life, is not where I'm always going to be. So well said. I am the light, our friend Rachel shares. My friends, I spent my time with you, but you spent your time with me and us. So I think we got the best end of this deal today. Thank you for sharing your light with us again, Kari. And we're excited to see you here on Circles every Monday at 6 p.m. Namaste, everyone. Peace and blessings to you. And we will see you again right here on Circles. Good night, everybody.
All right, goodbye. Thank you, everyone.